Welcome to the Marketing AI SparkCast, the go-to podcast where we explore the exciting intersection of artificial intelligence and marketing. Our aim is to spark your curiosity and inspire you to infuse your marketing with AI. Join Aby Varma, a B2B marketing leader, as he navigates you through this dynamic and ever-evolving landscape where technology meets creativity.
Hi, everyone. AI has been making all kinds of waves, and it is a world that is empowering marketers with lots of potential. However, in every marketing conversation and so many of these podcasts that I've already recorded, one question comes up consistently, a question about ethics and privacy, and how do we keep pace with all of those things, and what does that really mean for marketing teams to do so as an adopt AI in a ethically and a legally compliant manner. So today we are going to be unpacking all of that, and I am very excited to introduce Jodi Daniels. She is the CEO of Red Clover Advisors. It's a privacy consulting firm that helps businesses navigate data privacy laws and develop strategies to protect customer information while fostering trust, which is something that is needed in AI big time. So Jodi, welcome to the show.
Well, hello. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So why don't we just start with you just giving us a little bit of a background about Red Clover and how you guys help marketing teams today?
Red Clover is a boutique data privacy consultancy. We're helping companies comply with the alphabet soup of privacy laws. It started 6.5 years ago with GDPR, and then California started, and since then we have a wave of privacy laws. Think of us as the privacy operations team. The other way I like to help people think about it is you have HR consultants, HR attorneys, tax consultants, or CPAs and tax attorneys. There's room for both. And you have the core tasks that you have to be doing. You have to figure out what are these marketing campaigns and where the privacy risks might be, and what does the landing page need to look like? Where should your box be? What is that pixel that's firing? Is the cookie banner working? Is the cookie banner not working? All those types of questions, we're the team that can come in and either help assess, implement, review, keep managing on an ongoing basis. And so for some companies, we also serve as that fractional privacy team for organizations who might not have a full-time privacy person and might not need one, but they need someone paying attention to privacy on an ongoing basis.
They do. Thank you very much for that overview. I think to all the listeners, it would be super relevant, especially in the context of the conversation we're about to have. So thank you for that. So let's just dive in, Jodi. Start by sharing your perspective on the current state of AI in marketing, particularly as it relates to privacy and ethics. I mean, we're moving 200 miles an hour, over the last, I'd say 2 years or so. And privacy and ethics, typically it is on people's minds, but it sort of takes a backseat as people start looking at the more glamorous side of AI. So would love to get your perspective on how you see it all.
Well, I think the first part that's important is marketers are all about building trust in relationships with their customers and prospects. Their job is to get more people to buy more things, more stuff, right? And to do so, we're trying to convince them of our product or service is going to be amazing. It's going to help serve a need. You have to have it. It's going to be wonderful. And I'm trying to get you to trust me in doing that. One of the areas that AI and the ethics part breaks down is that trust. Can I trust that that's real? If it's a video or a picture, is that real? Is that a real person? Think about advertising, and you have the ad where there's an actor and they have to say it's an actor. Well, do I believe the actor? Do I believe that it's a real person? That element of trust is really critical. When we have pictures and videos now of the same thing, how will I know that that's authentic, that I can believe that person is saying something believable? If I think about the data that I might share, if I'm giving customer names into an AI tool, well, when it manipulates and it produces some type of output, well, what is that output? Did it make decisions? And did I give it multiple inputs? And has it made decisions that maybe are wrong? Has it assumed something about me? And now the marketing is going to be to me based on this profile, but that profile was not accurate. Those are some of the pieces that they need to think about, because privacy is all about the use, collection, and sharing and processing of data. I collect personal data, I do something with it. Well, if I use an AI tool to help me collect and process and use that data, and depending on the kind of data that I collect and I put into this tool, how it manipulates that, how it determines what that output is, and then what does the company or the marketing team do with that is then tied back to that element of trust. Because if I'm making a campaign and I'm supposed to believe you, does it resonate with me? Was it the right profile? Or are you just out to sell me? All of those are going to be some of the pieces that companies have to think about.
Very cool. So what are some of the common pitfalls you see marketing teams sort of fall into when they face when they want to begin implementing AI, right? So what's some of the things that you're seeing marketing teams have to deal with, and how can they avoid them?
One of the big ones is there are thousands. I mean, I think the last count was no joke, 7,000 AI tools. Everyone has an AI tool now. And if you don't evaluate that tool and the privacy and security of the tool you're giving data to, then that right there is a bit of a privacy risk. And everyone's in this race and they're trying to find just the coolest tool. And a lot of times people don't think about, wait, I just gave data to a tool. It could be company data. I mean, maybe it's sales data and you want to show interesting things, or maybe it's testimonials that you want to put in. But did you put the testimonial in and the name, right? That's still data that's going in there. Is it a CRM or something that's going to analyze the data, connect to your CRM? Is it a plugin that is now maybe going to grab data from your computer that you don't know about? And missing the privacy and security features of the actual tool is a really common miss. I mean, we just spoke about thinking about the data that you're inputting into the tool, and you have to be mindful for bias and the right ethics and the decisions that are coming in, actually review the data and make sure it makes sense. Well, I also want to make sure I can even trust the tool that I just put data in, because we all have received those data breach letters, and we don't want to do that for our customers. They trusted us to protect their data, and we have to realize just because it's free and says it can do something doesn't mean it's the best solution without first reviewing and vetting it.
Uh-huh. I mean, part of it is also then the technology providers. It's sort of incumbent on them to be transparent about how they're leveraging AI. I mean, you certainly don't want data from your CRM or whatever, even if an AI tool is sort of looking at data to analyze it and provide you insights. You don't want that information showing up publicly in, ChatGPT or have you. So that means, I mean, of course, from a marketing standpoint, our marketers need to evaluate these pieces of tech, but the technology providers, shouldn't they also be transparent about how the data is being leveraged in order to aid the marketers in that process?
Absolutely. And at the same time, especially for those working at potentially larger organizations that have some type of vendor process involved, and it doesn't have to be a huge company to have a vendor process, but there should be something that's really reviewing the company. That's where the internal teams are asking questions of the other vendor. How are you securing the data? How else are you using in the model? There's a long list of questions that are asked. Reviewing the terms. Do they have a standard terms? Do they have a specific contract that people are signing? Some of the language in those terms or contract is also going to help people be able to feel more comfortable with how that data is going to be used. When I go and look at a site, if I go and I look at the privacy notice and I can tell they barely slapped one together, or they copied it, or they just went and got the free version that I can see from a privacy policy generator, I have zero faith that they're going to take the privacy and security seriously. There are other companies that at the very beginning talk about as a feature set how they're going to protect or and use data, because they know that that is a concern for people, and they're sharing how their tool is using that upfront and at the beginning. Right there, I have a greater sense of trust for that company.
Very cool. So we mentioned transparency. Could you elaborate a little bit from a marketer's perspective, the importance of transparency in AI adoption, whether it's campaigns or use of technology? So as marketers that are using AI-based technology, do they need to be transparent that we're using AI-based technology? Does it need to show up in their privacy policy that AI tech's being used and those sort of things? Or what are some of those obligations that marketers should really be thinking about?
Well, one you just said, which is around disclosing how you're using AI in a privacy notice, is definitely the direction that we're starting to see. And we're also seeing this on a regulation standpoint. You might have heard of the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, they're taking a big position on AI and disclosures. They've always been one to make sure that there's strong, transparent disclosures. And our friends in the EU, as well as California, also are very focused on transparent disclosures. California being one who's introduced a very strong AI law. It hasn't passed yet. And then many other states are looking at this. That, I think when you look at the regulations, or even those just introduced, that's a sign for where we're going to need to get to. And we shouldn't just have to wait for laws for us to know what we should be doing now, which is explaining how might we be using AI in our campaigns. Some people might just be using it to help with their daily tasks in writing. Well, that might not have a whole lot of personal information. Maybe there's less disclosure there. If you're using it to help profile, to make decisions to determine audience segment 1 versus audience segment 2, and you're going to make decisions based on that, well, there's a very important distinction between a manual decision and an automatic decision. If it's an automatic decision, some of the privacy laws actually care about that. And you might have to unwind that. You might have to disclose that you make automated decisions, and you should disclose you make automated decisions by utilizing AI. So depending on what you're actually doing is where the level of disclosure should take place.
So for marketers, is there any best practices that they should be considering on the correct way to be compliant with regulation, or even just from an ethical standpoint on what those best practices may be in terms of collecting and utilizing that data, that where AI is sort of touching that data in some way, shape, form?
Well, I think the best practice for AI is actually not too different from the best practice just in general, which is for every kind of data that you're collecting, storing, sharing, using, you need to disclose that. And you need to think about the customer first, and you need to be able to have a way for the customer to opt out, to delete, to access that information. The same is going to be true for AI. It's just, not to undermine it, it is another tool, and it should follow the same good best practices that we're going to have for everything else that we're doing in marketing. Marketers should think about, am I giving too sensitive of information into this AI tool? How am I using this? Am I going to, again, that profiling piece is really important to understand what you're using to put together. And then what kind of decision is going to be made from it? The other best way to, I think, help from an AI point of view, we're talking a lot about profiling and risks and ethics, is put the worst case scenario hat on. Play devil's advocate. In the worst case, what could happen here? What could go wrong? Oh, well, they could target Jodi with 100% the wrong thing. Okay, well, what are you targeting me? Could I be harmed by that? A harm could be, do I have to pay more money for something? Could I not get an offer because I'm in this group over here? Have you discriminated against me? Could I find the creative offensive or the messaging offensive? Those are going to be the harms. I think it's helpful for people to put themselves in the customer's shoes and try and think kind of that worst case, because then you'll identify where the risks might be in a really simple way and be able to address them and determine no risk, small risk, big risk, and mitigate accordingly.
Speaking of risk mitigation, do you think some of this is some of the exposure that marketing teams and organizations face is mitigated by the promise of indemnification the bigger companies, the Microsofts and the OpenAIs of the world are putting out there, which is sort of lending the users of AI to be a little more kind of free with adoption? What is your take on that?
It's a very interesting question. I would not rely on that for a couple reasons. One, I think there are always clever people on the other side who are going to poke holes and find ways to do so. We're seeing that in the non-AI world. We're seeing that in pixel litigation. Everyone has pixels on their site, all different kinds for video and session replay and advertising and the metapixel. And you have all types of litigation firms who are taking old privacy laws and applying them to these pixels. So I am not an attorney. I have not read those indemnification clauses. Do they cover every single law under the sun? My hunch, maybe not. And I just always think you're going to find someone who's going to find that loophole and find a way in. The other thing is I think if you take that stance of, oh, that's their problem, you lose ownership and responsibility. And the reality is that customers have a relationship, or prospects have a relationship with you. And going back to what I said at the beginning, marketers' jobs are to earn more money, to get more customers, to get existing people to keep staying as a customer and potentially to up level. We're trying to build relationships. We're trying to get them to love our products and our services. We want them to trust us. If I'm doing activities that maybe isn't in the best interest of the customer, and I don't care because I'm covered by some indemnification by a large company, that doesn't put the customer at the best interest. And I think that shows through in the marketing that I receive, in the messaging that I receive, in the creative that I receive. And ultimately, I think customers will recognize that and make decisions with their wallets, which won't be in the best interest of the company.
Wise words. So earlier in the conversation, you referenced people are using AI for grouping like-minded customers and segmentation and those sort of things. To me, I think there is tremendous promise in leveraging AI-based technologies for personalization and personalization at scale. To me, I think humans are not good at sort of recognizing patterns in random grouping of data, which AI could be taking random patterns and sort of coagulating those patterns into segments and then sort of customizing content that pertains to those specific segments. So to me, I feel personalization is a huge opportunity. So from a marketer's standpoint, the drive for personalization, which would result in better engagement, higher conversions, which is what marketers strive for. And how do they balance that with the need for privacy?
Well, personalization, I want personalization. I came across a really lovely ad the other day and I'm excited to try that new product. At the same time, I also know I've received ads and mailers that I don't want, or I don't want people having that information right now. There's a balance of the very official creepy factor, right? Where is that line? And it's all about using the technology and the data that we have smartly. In my opinion, especially when we talk about the deprecation of cookies, we have people moving more to first party data. Well, if I'm going to want more data, I need to, yet again, that trust angle is so important. I need to have people trust me so that I can ask them what they want. The best way to get personalization is to get it from the people themselves. What type of products are you really interested in? Tell me more about the problems that you're having or what your wish list is. Then I can take that data that you gave me, hopefully honestly, because if I don't give it honestly and I don't trust the company, what happens? I get bad data. Now marketers are making decisions on bad data, which is expensive and no one wins there. If we have that trust piece up front, I give you great data. Now I can use that data. If we apply what we've been talking about, vetting the right AI tools to be able to use them smartly, I can have a really intelligent campaign that removes some of the maybe manual tasks, creates a really excellent marketing message to someone who is accurate because I gave you that data. If we're kind of guessing on personalization, this is where the ethics piece can really come in, because if I guess wrong, depending on how I'm guessing and what the parameters are, that could have big consequences. If it's simple and I guess, you want red and I got blue, well, all right, I got the color wrong. That's pretty innocuous. But there's some others that are just bigger impacts. And again, depending on what you're doing. So I think personalization is here. I think personalization is good. I personally think the way we should get there is by asking people and building that relationship and slowly getting the data as we continue to move over time, and then being able to apply it intelligently in different tools.
Yeah, and you referenced cookies, and we were already there in a lot of regards, or heading in a cookieless world, and the reliance on first-party data. What is the impact of AI in that whole world?
Well, I think everyone wants AI to solve everything. I'm not sure we're quite there yet. I think AI has the capability of reviewing and calculating and manipulating data at a faster pace that we might not have been able to before. AI isn't going to replace the ability of placing a pixel and being able to follow a user. They're not the same technologies. They're different technologies that are going to show up to be able to help us do that. The idea of tracking and following is just a variety of different IDs. I'm not sure it's necessarily AI compared to any of the other tools and ways that we've been collecting IDs nowadays. I think AI will just allow it to be processed faster. So if I was a different ID and maybe I'm using a clean room or something like that, I can give more data, I can process it more quickly and potentially have better outcomes as long as we follow all the right steps that we've been talking about so far.
Yep. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about ownership of content. So to me, Um, Obviously, near and dear to marketers, there's lots of content that marketers put out. There's copyright law and trademark law, but it all boils down to the concept of ownership. There have been a whole load of recent legal cases, like New York Times and against, OpenAI and Microsoft, raising concerns like that. How do these issues help us understand the need for AI-based innovation with protecting rights? I know some of these cases are still sort of ongoing, but would love to get your perspective on, how you see these cases where these big companies that have vast amounts of content are going after these large language model companies, the OpenAIs and the Microsofts and the Googles of the world, in terms of them not explicitly giving the rights for those companies to sort of index their content to train the AI, even though that content may have been in the public domain?
It's a really interesting question. I think let's take our marketers who are creatives, and then at the same time, everyone who's writing content, we're all content owners and producers. So you have this podcast, I have a podcast, I have a blog, right? All of us have this content. If you have another company be able to just take that content so that Susie over here can go and make a query and take the content that we spent a lot of time writing, is that okay? Is everyone listening who's written an article okay that someone else can now go take parts of that and call it their own? It's kind of like when we were in high schools. Maybe you were okay with sharing and maybe you weren't okay. I don't know. Everyone can answer that question silently. But I think that's part of this discussion. In the other piece, I think honestly, just my personal view, is if all we end up doing is copying the content that's already out there, it will just be the same content regurgitated, which could weaken the ability for new thinking, which that personally scares me and makes me sad because we want to encourage creative thinking. We want to encourage new ideas to come out there. Or it's all going to sound the same, and the people who aren't going to do it will sound so different that and they'll rise to the top. Personally, I'm kind of hopeful, and I understand, and I think the New York Times and other organizations like that have the right to do so, and it makes sense. That's their content. They've spent decades, hundreds of years building this brand to be able to put out reputable content, to have a tool come so that someone else can grab just a little bit, call it their own. There's a lot behind that. The same could be true for design, not just written word, but take a photo, take a video. If I take the photo and I put it here, right, all the free photos want you to credit the person. So if I lose the ability to credit the person, then why would anyone go and take a picture and put it out into the universe? I think we'll lose the creative spirit that has made this world beautiful.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And conversely, I was having a discussion, and this sort of made me think that maybe even some of the legal framework for copyright and ownership needs to be looked at in the context of AI. Because what if somebody did leverage AI in order to create pieces and use it, whether it's first drafts or multiple versions or final drafts, what have you? But can then they claim it as their copyrighted piece, right? Because to me, and that one was sort of broke my brain as I was thinking about it, because I don't know if again, I'm not a lawyer, but don't know the legal frameworks accounts for things like that. And sort of the world of AI is changing some of the preconceived notions about copyrights and ownership. So certainly it's going to be an interesting journey to see how the outcomes of some of these legal battles and what that landscape looks like.
Agreed.
All right. So for marketing teams that are just starting to explore AI, I work with a bunch of them. I'm in discussions. I speak to hundreds of marketers about this stuff, and they all want to know. It all comes up in some way, shape, form on if I'm starting my journey, what do I need to do in terms of come up with some governance or guardrails in order to adopt it in sort of a compliant and ethical manner. And most times for more mature and bigger organizations, there's already some sort of a AI committee or council already within those organizations. But in organizations, that is not the case. I will advise marketers to typically do that. Find the right representation, put a team together, and then you can sit down and really document some of those things on the do's and don'ts. How would you approach it, or how would you recommend marketing teams start that process and sort of establishing governance and documenting some of their guardrails?
I think the first is you need to literally document and understand what kind of data you're going to use and what are you going to use? How do you want to use it? What do you want those outcomes to be? Identify the tools and what is important to you and your organization for selecting those tools. Everyone will have a little bit of a different level of importance. I would put that privacy and security piece for the actual tool. Want to make sure that they won't use it for their own purposes. That would be an important piece for us, or when we're advising clients, that they have really good, strong security and privacy measures. We don't want to upload personal information that makes its way back out there. Those would be some of the initial considerations. And then obviously I would also check with your own company policy. There might already be an AI governance policy, and we want to make sure that marketing teams are working within the confines of their company governance rules. If you don't have a policy yet, maybe you should be part of the team to help create one so that all the teams are consistent in how they're approaching and evaluating. So to recap, it's really to understand at the very basic, what are you actually collecting? How do you want to use it? Then you're going to determine the tools and make sure that those are good, secure, and appropriate tools. And then you also want to determine if you have to do any disclosures. Do you need to update anything in a privacy notice? And if you're using personal data, you will have to likely be able to unwind that. Meaning if you include a Jodi and Jodi comes along and says, I would like for you to delete my data, you have to know where I am to be able to delete me.
Yeah, that was super useful. So Jodi, home stretch here as we wrap up this podcast episode. You work with a lot of marketing organizations, and no one has a crystal ball, so we don't know how this AI journey is going to shake out, but we do know that it's moving super fast. So looking ahead, any parting thoughts on biggest challenges and opportunities for marketers in the realm of AI and compliance and privacy that they need to be thinking about?
I think the two challenges are the ones we've been talking about a little bit, which is that information will be used inappropriately by the third party. Maybe it violates your own contract, your own privacy policy, or just your customers' expectations. The second is going to be the bias that can happen. So if you're taking that data, you're manipulating it, you're reviewing it, you're adding it to other data sets, and some outcome comes and you make decisions on it, and that decision has bias and it's wrong, or it discriminates against someone. So you really have to understand the data going in and how the model will create it. For things like generative AI, where it's content and pictures, then we have the copyright issues, the element of disclosure, right? A little bit kind of different context. So for me, on the opportunity side, I think the generative AI with content and pictures, work with your legal teams and appropriate professionals to be able to use the tools to help make your job easier and take advantage of what is here. There are some really cool and amazing tools to be able to help make your function be as effective as possible. And also on utilizing data. So we're thinking about our CRMs and our email lists and combing through data to be able to make sure our messages are going to the right people. We just have to do it in a privacy first way. And to do so, you have to identify the right people in the organization who can help you do that. Maybe that's you who's listening, and that's wonderful. Just make sure we don't lose sight of the privacy first approaches, because if we don't, the consequences are our customers not trusting us. And I really firmly believe how important trust is, because that's the entire relationship that we have with our customers. And this is just one part of that. And we wouldn't want our role to be what breaks that chain.
Awesome. That was super useful. And thank you, Jodi. Really appreciate your time today and your perspective. And to our listeners, we really hope that today's discussion has helped you think about trust and privacy and ethical use of AI in marketing and how to go about it. It's a conversation that all of us really need to be part of. We would love to hear your thoughts and experiences or questions around this topic. So feel free to connect with me or Jodi on LinkedIn. Make sure to follow Red Clover Advisors on social media, especially for those teams that have not looked at privacy as the general topic. Please make sure you hit up Red Clover and Jodi for that. And thank you very much for listening in. And until next time, stay curious and keep innovating.